Here we have the Lyricus index, which is an alphabetized list of all of the tags on the site. Now, one thing I'd like to do is stick each of these headings to the top of the page when it reaches that point. So for example, as I scroll, the A is at the top, so I would want that to stick right here until we get to the end of the container, and the same for B. Here's a better illustration of that. You might be used to this on mobile. So we have a heading here. When we get to the top, it should stick right there until we get to E, and then E should stick. All right, we can do this actually fairly easy today with plain CSS, no JavaScript required. If I switch to the view for this page, you can see we have an index, we filter through them, and for each letter and its associated indices, we render a letter, and then we loop through all of those indices, and we spit the name on the page. So that represents each one of these. Okay, let's say on our heading here, I want to set a position of sticky. And this may be new to you. You may not be familiar with it. Let's open up Chrome DevTools. I'll select this heading here, and I'm going to set position sticky. Now, out of the box, it's not going to do anything. So if I scroll, it's as if nothing happened. So on the condition that you set a position of sticky, but you don't set an offset, you don't set a top value, then it will behave as a relatively positioned element. And that's an important thing to understand about this value. It's sort of like a hybrid between position relative and position fixed. So normally it'll display as relative, but when it hits a certain point, a certain offset, then it switches to a position of fixed. So let's specify a top of 0. When it gets to that point, then I want it to be fixed. Okay, so now notice as I scroll, the G remains. You see there. It's just a subtle little thing. Let's try it one more time. It doesn't go off the page. It remains until the end of its container. So let's see, right here, it will remain until the bottom of its container. And then H takes over. Okay, sounds like this is really easy. So with Tailwind, we can use a class of sticky, or again, I use a prefix with Tailwind. So I would do TW sticky. Now, an important thing to note, this will be available as of Tailwind 0.5, I think it is. So if you're trying this out with me and it's not working, yeah, you might need to update Tailwind. Now, again, just because we add that doesn't mean it's going to work. So if I come back, give it a refresh and scroll, nothing happens here. And that's because once again, without some kind of coordinate, it will behave as a relatively positioned element. So let's pin it to the top. And that's the equivalent to saying top 0. Okay, so now if I give it a refresh, you'll see, well, J, K, and L, you'll notice the heights are so short, there's no place for them to scroll, so they won't. But once we get to M, there will be available space. So M will be locked to the top of the page, as you see there. Same with P. It's really easy. Let's now bring it to a mobile layout, and we're going to see the exact same thing. So K is locked to the top of the page. Very, very cool stuff. Now P, now Q, now R. And that was done with 2 CSS properties. Now, one thing to be aware of, it's a relatively new thing. However, if it doesn't work, it's just going to behave exactly the way we had before. So that's a nice enhancement there. You'll find it won't work in the latest version of Internet Explorer. Safari still requires the WebKit prefix. Chrome does not. But again, if you're using Tailwind and you're getting some kind of auto prefixing out of the box, that will not be a problem. And don't forget, for all things like this, you can go to caniuse.com and then search for it. Sticky. Here we go. So here is the current support. As noted, no version of Internet Explorer supports it. However, Edge does have mostly support. It looks like there's a few edge cases there with table rows. Firefox is good. Again, it looks like Chrome has some issues with the table head element. Safari is good with the prefix, as we noted. And iOS, of course, works as well. But yeah, it's always good to be aware of these things. But yeah, once again, in this case, there's no problem because if it doesn't work, it'll just display exactly the way it normally did. So this is a quick and easy enhancement.